Good evening. Nice to have you, Mark. You're not always here. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Basra, Daf Yud Gimel. Thank God it's a picture book day, as you can see on Yud Gimel and Aleph, and we'll be starting 3/4 of the way down at the two dots, about 15 lines or so from the bottom of Yud Beis and Yud Beis, heading to the very bottom of Yud Gimel and Yud Beis. Let us jump right in. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna Beis Rabbi Yeshua, Pshita Chelek Bechor Bechelek Pashut. Let's say that you have a Bechor and a Pashut. You have an oldest brother and a younger brother, and they're separating, they're collecting Yerusha. So we know that the older child has Pishnayim, he gets 2x, and the younger child gets x. So the halacha is Yavinon le Echad Mitzra. What we have to do, Achad Mitzra, I should say, is that we have to make sure that of the three properties, that the Bechor gets two properties that are near each other. He either gets properties 1 and 2 that are adjoined at a border, or properties 2 and 3. But it's inappropriate, halachically speaking, to give him 1 and 3 and have something in between. Let him have the two properties that are together. Yavam Mai. Oh, anybody want to throw back to Yavamos? But Yavam, he gets his property, and because he's a Yavam, he also gets the brother's share of his property in a Yerusha. So he also gets 2x. Not because he's the Bechor, but because he's a Yavam. Do we apply the same rule that we just said about a Bechor, that when a Bechor is taking 2 out of 3 fields, that they have to have a common border, fields 1 and 2, or fields 2 and 3? Will we apply the same din by a Yavam, yes or no? Amar Abaye, who cares why it is that he gets Pishnayim? You either get Pishnayim because the Pasuk says you're a Bechor, or you get Pishnayim because you're a Yavam. One way or the other, Abaye says no reason to differentiate, which means that both a Bechor and a Yavam, when they are given out their Yerusha, and they're given 2x versus the x of the younger brother, and now there are 3 fields. So both the Bechor and the Yavam, when they're given those properties, it's fields 1 and 2, which share a border, or 2 and 3, which share a border. But we don't give either of them, the Bechor or the Yavam, 1 and 3, because that makes no sense. Why would you force the guy to have separate properties? That's unreasonable. My time. Well, what is the reason why we say he? Because Bechor Kaya Rachmana. Because Lamaisa, we refer to the Yavam in this case as a Bechor. In Rashi for some halachic discussion. Rava says no. Amar Kara ha-Bechor. Haviyasok Bechor. You're right. He's similar to the Bechor in one way in that he gets 2x, but he doesn't get 2x because he gets 2x. He gets 2x because it's 1 plus 1 because he's a Yavam, and because his brother died, so therefore he gets 2. But But we don't have this din that when a Yavam collects that it's like the Chalukah is like that, and therefore when it's a Yavam he does get 2x. But it could be the case that he would get property 1 and 3 and not have it on a shared border. We would not demand that it be divvied up that way.
Why should he be any worse than a bar metzra? I go to sell my field, and the bar metzra has the right of first refusal. And we're talking about all complete strangers.
These are not complete strangers.
Correct. Kol shekain. Why should he lose out?
But neither of them. Bar metzra is that somebody's moving out.
Next door to me. I'm going to sell, right? And I was going to sell tomorrow.
That's not our case. Our case is Yerusha.
Correct. But why should it be any worse?
But because nobody owned either of the fields.
But why are we in? What's the reason for bar metzra to make it convenient for them to water, etc.?
Right.
Why are we inconveniencing this yavam any more than?
So we're going to see on the next Amud that some of these things enter into the world of Midas Stone. If you make this decision, you're really not a good person, even though halacha may allow it. Mm-hmm. So what Rava is saying is that halachically speaking, let's take it away from this case for a second. The lumdus of a Bechor getting Pishnayim and the lumdus of a Yavam getting Pishnayim are not the same lumdus.
It's not Pishnayim.
It's not Pishnayim. It's 1 plus 1. So because that's true, yes, it's true that they get 2x. But because it's not be'etzem Pishnayim for the Yavam, the requirement of it them being on one border of the two properties is not a requirement. You're right, it's Midas Stone. It's not nice.
Why should he be any worse off?
It's fine, but the answer to your question is that he's not a Bechor. He's not. That's a din by a Bechor. Yavam is not a Bechor. The Yavam has similarities to a Bechor, but he's not. He's 1 plus 1. So the Gemara says, Ahu de Zavan Ara a mitzra de Beinoshe. A property was sold on the border of one's father or father-in-law, and Ki Kapalgu Amarle Pliguli Amitzrai. He says, I want to have something on my own border when I get this property. So Amar Rabba, he says, Kigon Ze Kofan Al Midastom. In a case like that where there's a Yerusha, yeah, don't be a jerk. don't be a jerk. Midas stom is defined as no skin off my back, but I don't want you to have it anyways. Right? It's a jerk move. And sometimes my brother-in-law and I, Yosef, we sometimes say this about maybe some younger family members who sometimes do things. Well, if you can't have it, I'm throwing it as far away as I can. Like it's like a child move. That's midas stom. So sometimes when our kids don't understand, hopefully, we say like, "Oh, you're a regular Baal Stom." Okay, that's gewaldig. So that's not nice, and therefore we don't do that. But Maskif Lo Rav Yosef, hold on one second. Not always is it the case that it's midas stom. After all, Amri Le, Achi, his brothers can say, Ma'alinan le'ilave ki nichse de bar Miriam. Maybe the middle property, which forces me to separate you to properties 1 and 3, is chashuv like the properties of Bar Miriam, Spitz land. So therefore, that's not a case of midas stom. Midas stom is where there's no skin off my back, but I'm still going to be a jerk to you and say 1 and 3 just to hurt you. But if really the middle property is better than 1 and 3, so that's not midas stom, and I could be makbid gomer. There, I'm allowed to say, I'm sorry. Field number 2 it grows nicer. It has a better watering. I don't know, whatever the improvement is. It's not midas stom. Midas stom is only when there's no skin off my back, but I want to be a jerk anyways. The Hilchasa, in this particular case, Rav Yosef, this is not a case of midas stom. We hold like Rav Yosef. Trey arasa, a trey nagre. Let's say that there's 2 lands which are accompanied by 2 aqueducts, 2 small. The nagras are not rivers; they're like the small little veins off of a river. They're like small amount of water. Amarabba could go and say kofanal midas stom. Here too, we could have a case scenario where I can say, "You're right. I could have taken either one, but I'm going to take the one that's a bigger jerk move." So field 1 and 2 are the same for me, but I'm going to take 2 just to mess you over. That's midas stom. It says the Gemara, Maskif Lo Rav Yosef, Zimnin, Dahai, Midvil, Vahai Lo Midvil. That's not true. Sometimes the small nagra, the small little veins of water, one can dry up and the other can't. So I'm taking a gamble. That's not midas stom. The Hilchos in this case too, Rav Yosef. Next, Tarte Achad Nagra, 2 pieces of land with 1 vein of water between them. Rav Yosef was the one who kept saying it's not midas stom. Here we flip. Rav Yosef, 3 lines from the bottom of Yud Beis Mud Beis, Kegon Zeh Kofen al midas stom. The Gemara says this is midas stom. Maskif Lo Abaye Mati Amar Ba'ina Da'afi Sharise. He says, the guy says, I want to keep the middle property because if the other guy has 1 and 3, he's going to have workers on 1 and 3, and that's Afi Sharise. I'm going to be surrounded by sharecroppers. It's better protection for my field. Derech Agav. And V'Hilchas Rav Yosef, we reject that svara and say no, that is taka, a case of midas stom. Afushe lab milsi. Having a lot of sharecroppers around is not a real thing. Turning to the top of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. This is a ta'am of what the later parts of the Masechta will feel like. It's just 15, 20 lines on an amud. So this is a ta'am. We haven't had that really because we've had some very large blot of Gemara of late, but this one's a little easier. And the picture in Rashi over here is this case. Chad Gisa Nagra. On one side of the square of property, we have the Nagra with the smaller vein of the smaller creek, as it were, of water. V'chad Gisa Nahara. Then on the top, as you can see over there, is an actual river. There, Palginan Le Bekarnazol. There, we break things up by the corners. And if you look at the picture, we're not looking at the Rishonim here, no time, but the Gemara says, Reish, Shin, Reishin, that's Reuven, Shimon, Reuven, Shimon, Reuven, Shimon, Reuven, Shimon. It's all split up equally because on the Nahar side, the water on the Nahar side is all but guaranteed. Rivers don't dry up all that often. So therefore, Reuven and Shimon split over there. On the Nagra side, which is the little creek of water that comes off the river, Reuven and Shimon. And on the other 2 sides, on Drom and Marav, they are also split by Reuven and Shimon. My own question, I didn't look this up, but why can't Reuven have all of the Marav and Shimon have all of the Drom? L'chora, that would probably work. But I don't, unless there's a particular svara as to why that's the case. The only thing I can think of is that they're not closer to the water. Like now the Reuven,
close to the field.
no, the Hefech. Because if we had, let's say, all Reuven on the Marav wall, then it would be Reuven. And on the Durham wall, it would be Shimon. Right. That's a plus. The downside, actually, there is no downside. I was going to say that one of them is not as close to the water in either case, but that's not true because one would be Reuven, one would be Shimon. I don't know why this is the case, but I didn't look into it. So that's what the Gemara says. That's the right way to split this up. Okay. On the second line of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, we had said, below us at Traklin, we were talking about different homes that were able to split and able to not split. We're not going to talk about what a Traklin is. We're going to get into an important Shas sugya over here, which is, What happens if ein bahen kadei lazeh uchadei lazeh mahu? We're in a case where there should be a chalukah. And as we've spoken about, the field really needs to be 4x8 for each of us. Remember, we spoke about the knisa plus the chutzner split. Each of us should be able to get 4x8. What if the field is so small, the chutzner is so small, that there isn't enough to split? So we said in our Mishnah that in such a case, there will be no chalukah. Okay, but what do we do lemaisa? Like, how do we even out financially? This is a machlokas samurai. Rabbi Huda Omar is dina de good, good. Oh, agud. Sorry, let me start over. Is dina de god o agod. The word god is a tzivoy of you make a price and I'll pay, and agod is I'll make a price and you'll pay. In other words, we're gonna. Svi gave me the term for this just before, and it's a buy-sell provision. I think he told me. Does that make sense? Anybody in the business world, a buy-sell provision? I don't know, something like that. No, he said it's like a thing. He's like, people will think you know what you're talking about.
Buy or sell.
I don't know, a buy or sell provision. That's where one person makes a price. Whatever, you get the idea. But that's what
Two partners.
right.
Okay.
So it's two partners,
Two partners.
and we want to offload. We want to offload, right?
Right.
So
Right. It's pretty much every LLC.
right. Of course, I didn't know that.
Have plenty.
So the Gemara says that if you and I are partners, let's say that Mark and I are partners, and we have a field that we're supposed to split, but we can't because the field is too small. So then the Gemara says that I can tell Mark to make a price, or Mark can tell me to make a price, and then we'll buy until we're happy. However, that's only Rabbi Huda who says that we can solve this problem fiscally, because Rav Nachman Amar leis dina de god o agud. There is no din of saying I make a price or you make a price. Now we're going to question this. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman. Rava says to Rav Nachman, L'didach, according to you, the Amris leis dina de god o agod, who says that you're not allowed to solve this problem financially, that I can't make Mark make a price, and Mark can't make me make a price. So then the case of Bechor upashut, sheiniach lanavi and eved ubehema tmeya, ketzad osin. If you have a Bechor and a Pashut, who between the two of them, their financial relationship of the Yerusha is 2x and x, that the Bechor gets 2x and the Pashut gets x, and if the father left them something that wasn't money, eved ubehema tmeya, you can't eat a behema tmeya. What are you going to do with the eved? So the Gemara says, ketzad osin. The Gemara says, Amar le shani omer. What would Rav Nachman say? I say, ovid lezeh yom echad lezeh shnei yamim. Well, we can solve it by other ways. We're not going to sell them, but what we are going to do is have the animal work for the Bechor 2 days to every 1 day that it works for the Pashut. And that's a great solution financially. So that was question 1, asked and answered. Here's question 2, about 8 lines down or so on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Meisvei. Mishachetzio eved v'chetzio ben chorin. You have an eved who's only half an eved and half ben chorin. This can happen when you have 2 owners and only one frees the eved. So he gets a get shiur from one of his masters, and that makes him into a half ben chorin, and the other half remains a half eved. Oved es rabo yom echad ve'es atzmo yom echad di Rabbi Hillel. Beis Hillel was of the opinion that the way this person lives is that he does 1 day as a ben chorin and 1 day as an, just alternating days. Beit Shammai omrim takantem es rabo. You did right by the master. I agree with you, because the master for whom he's still a chatzi eved, he works every other day. You did right by him. The problem is it's atzma lo takantem, but you've left the eved in a very difficult predicament. Why is that? Lisa shivcha einu yachol. He's not allowed to marry a shivcha because half of his status is as a ben chorin, and it's usher for a ben chorin to marry a shivcha. Lisa bas chorin einu yachol. He can't marry a bas chorin because he's part eved, so he's stuck, and that's a problem. Yavatel. You wanted to just not have children. V'halo lo nivra ha'olam ella lepirya v'rivya. Very powerful line. The world was created to continue the world. That's a very sharp idea. Seemingly Yidden and Goyim alike. That seems to be the obligation. Shenemar lo so v'ra la sheves yitzara. That the world wasn't created for emptiness, but rather la sheves, to settle the world. And therefore, it can't be, says Beis Shammai, that the scenario is as you've left it, that he works 1 day and doesn't work another day. Because if you say that, then we're going to leave him in a scenario where he can't get married. Ella, says the Gemara, Kofen es rabo v'osin oso ben chorin. We go to the master who did not free his eved and left him as an eved, and we force him to free the other person. And then there's a shtar that's written between the Eved who is now a Ben Choren, that this guy who was half Eved, half Ben Choren, when he gets freed, he owes half of his value back to his master. It's a halachic loop. We don't have a choice. We have to free him because otherwise he can't have children. But we can't leave the master without an Eved. So that means that he therefore has to pay, the Eved has to pay the master for half of the Eved's value as he's freed. And in such a case, after Beis Hillel heard this with their tremendous humility, because this is not so common, the Gemara says 5 lines from the bottom, the Chazru Beis Hillel lahoros kedivrei Beis Shammai, that they changed their opinion. Now, what don't we see in this case? We don't see financial bartering. We don't see this idea of god o agod. Why not? Must be that it's not a valid option. Must be that that's a kasha against Rav Yehuda in support of Rav Nachman. The Gemara says no. Shiny hacha. The case with the Eved is not a reasonable case. To agod ika, but god leka. Because you're right that the other person can make a price for him, but he can't make a price to be repurchased. Because if you are a half Ben Choren, you cannot sell your half Ben Choren and make yourself an Eved again. That's usher. You cannot make yourself into an Eved. So therefore, this case is not a raya, and Rav Nachman can still hold on to his shita. And 4 lines from the bottom, another question against this machlokas between Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman. Tashma, Shnei Achin, Echad Ani ve'Echad Asher. There's 2 brothers, one who's poor and one who's wealthy. V'hiniach len avi and merchatzu beis habad. The father left over for his 2 children a bathhouse and an olive press. A sa'an l'schar. If these things are used, let's say they're stores that function and they generate revenue, then aschar la'emtza, then fine, split, no problem. It's a Yerusha. We're assuming that there's no Bechor in this case. Whatever the case is, they're splitting evenly. Now, asan le'atzmo, what if they were just kept by the brothers? How do they split properly? Hare ashir omer la'ani. The wealthy person can say to the poor person, turning to the top of Yud Gimel Amud Beis, what he'll say is, Kach lecha avadim v'yirchatzu b'merchatz. Go take avadim for yourself and go bathe in the merchatz. Kach lecha zeisim uva v'aseh b'beis habad, and go use the beis habad. You can use them as you wish. What option is not over here? Rav Nachman's option, Rabbi Yehuda's option of saying god. What's the language? It's god o agod. Why don't we do that over here? Elamai, perhaps that Rav Nachman is wrong, that Rav Nachman is correct and Rabbi Yehuda is wrong. Says the Gemara, Yud Gimel Amud Beis on the second line, Hasam Nami, Godika, Agud Leka. The poor guy can say to the rich guy, here's my price, pay me out. But the other guy's poor. The rich guy can't say to the poor guy, make me a price. He has no money. He can't spend money. So therefore, the case is not comparable, and therefore you can't ask a kasha on Rav Nachman. Let's ask our 4th question, 3 lines down. Tashma, Kol she'ilu yechalek v'shmo alav cholken. Anything that we said, if you cut it in half and it still has the name of that item, so then you're allowed to be cholken. You want to split a bowling ball? That doesn't work. You want to split a large towel that's large enough for 2 beach towels and it still functions as a towel, they're still called a towel. So then cholken. And imlav ma'alin oso b'damim. And if not, then what do we see over here? We see the exact opposite. We see exactly like Rabbi Yehuda, which is that we work out the monies. If we're not able to split in a normal way, we make sure things are even in the bank accounts. Says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. This is a beautiful Marim Makom, and really Tanoihi. There's a machlokas Tanoim between the shitas of Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Let's review. We learned that what happens if you and I are forced to split something in halacha, but there isn't enough for us to split. We learned that there's 2 shitas. Rabbi Yehuda says that you can say god o agud. That means between me and you, we determine a price and you can buy me out and I can buy you out. According to Rav Nachman, that does not work. We've seen in the Brisas that there are various shitas, and therefore because we've seen in the Brisas that there are various shitas, it seems to be that there's a machlokas tanaim about this. What's the machlokas tanaim? The Tanya. Let's say that you and I have a deal together, but we can't really split properly. And I'm a nice guy. I say to you, tol ato shiur, you take the 4x4. And for me, v'ani pachos, I'll take the 4x3. Yeah, you're right. Ladina, I don't have to do this, but I'm going lifting. I'll take the smaller property. I don't even want to spend the time doing the math. Just give me the smaller property. So the Tanakama says, Shomin lo, that we do allow the person to be a Baal Chesed, and we allow him to give of himself and to take a smaller property. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, he says, no, ein Shomin lo. Let's say that Mark and I are in deal together. We're not able to split because the properties are not the right size after splitting. So I say to Mark, look, Mark, you take the 4x4. I'll take the 4x3. Yeah, I know. I know. Really, I don't have to. I'm gonna be a nice guy. I don't care. It's only one amma. It's only one whatever. I'm fine. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Hey Chidami, what's the case over here? Ile Makidetani. If you want to say that the brisa is exactly like we just saw it, then my time of the Rosh Bag, why would Rav Shimon ben Gamliel not allow me to be the nice guy and take a slightly smaller property? Elalav, it must be that Chasure Mechzer B'Hachi Ka'amar or B'Hachi Ketani. There's 3 versions of this Gemara. One is the way we have it, Chasure Mechzer B'Hachi Ka'amar. But if you're a regular, you'll know that that syntax is incorrect. Those 2 things don't flow. It's Chasure Mechzer B'Hachi Ketani, not B'Hachi Ka'amar. So that's version number 2. And version number 3 is that there is no Chasure Mechzera. It's just Elalav Hachi Ka'amar. So the dialect here is a little confusing. What? What's not a Mishnah? B'Hachi Ketani. We're teaching of the brisa. No, that's fine. That the Ketani is fine. What we have here is probably wrong. This doesn't make sense because of the syntax. But what's probably correct is Elalav Hachi Ka'amar, or Elalav Chasure Mechzer B'Hachi Ketani. But what is in our Gemara is incorrect for sure. Yeah. But Hachi Ketani does work because it is quoting a brisa. It's the brisa from right above. And what would it be if it were to be a brisa? Tola tashir v'ani pachos shomenlo. The god o agod nami shomenlo. This is being added to the brisa that we just saw. We're adding in. It's not just talking about me being a nice guy and taking a 4x3 property when I don't need to. Or you and I could be god o agod. I can tell you to make a price. You can tell me to make a price, and we can pay out evenly shomenlo. And v'aseh rashbag lememar ein shomenlo in regards to only that one latter piece of the god o agod. And therefore, we see that there's a machlokes Tanakama and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel as to whether or not we say god o agod, with the Tanakama saying yes and Rashbag saying no. That reflects the shitas of Rav Yehuda who says yes and Rav Nachman who says no. Perfect. Says the Gemara lo. Nope, there's no machlokes Tanai. Laolam kideh katani. Really, the Bryce says like it was originally. And all that was happening is that Mark and I were splitting a property that was really too small to split, but I was being the nice guy. Still, udika amris my time of the Rashbag. Why did Rav Shimon ben Gamliel say I'm not allowed to be the nice guy? Mishum de amar le ibedmei les lidmei lemetanach b'matana lo nichali. Because Mark will say to me, Phil, you're a nice guy. If you're expecting me to pay you for the fact that you're taking a smaller property, I'm not willing. I don't have any cash. And if you're telling me that it's a matana, I don't want a matana. Why not? Dichsiv bisone matanos yichya. It's good for you to hate matanos. So therefore, the Gemara the Gemara says that Rashbag really does have footing for his shita. Rashbag had said that I'm not allowed to be the nice guy and just say, Mark, I'm going to take the smaller property. Why? Well, either because it puts Mark on the defensive, now he has to pay me something because he has a more property, and Mark might not have any liquid cash, or because Sonem Atanos Yichya. So maybe he's correct. Amar Le'a Bailer of Yosef. Hada Rav Yehuda Dishmuel. The shita of Rav Yehuda that we saw, that we do allow for god or agod, for me and you to work together to find that middle ground of the pricing, that is the shita of Shmuel. This shouldn't be terribly surprising because Yehuda learned in the base medrash of Shmuel, under Shmuel. What did it say originally? It didn't say Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. That's why the Gemara is doing this. What? I know, but not here. So and on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, on the 3rd line, it just says Rabbi Yehuda Amar, and it doesn't say in the name of whom. So now the Gemara is saying, where did he get it from? And the Gemara is saying he got it from Shmuel. What's that? That is based on a Mishnah. Of course, Shmuel wasn't Amora, so there's a Mishnah that Shmuel will that he will talk about. So the Gemara says, that's not the Kisvei HaKodesh. When we talk about Kisvei HaKodesh, when we talk about Holy Scrolls, Afal Pisha Shneim Rotzen, even if both people are willing to cut the parchment, Lo Yachloku, you're not allowed. And listen to this very, very gentle diuk of the Gemara. V'amar Shmuel, Shmuel says as follows. He says, Lo Shanu Ela Bikrach Echad. This is only true when it's all inside one krach. Aval B'Shnei Krichos, if in fact it's in 2 different volumes, so then Cholken, we do allow for that split to take place. Says the Gemara, V'isal Kadaitach Leis Dina de Godo Agod. If you want to say that Shmuel, that the Mishnah doesn't hold of the din of Godo Agod, my area Bikrach Echad, Afilu b'shnei krachanami. Why would we allow the splitting even of 2 krachim? Those 2 krachim don't weigh the same thing. They don't have the same exact value. No, you still have to even out with dollars. But by virtue of the fact that we don't allow splitting in 1, but we do allow splitting in 2, that shows you that if we allow the splitting in 2, that also means we hold of god and godo agod. So that's the same shita that Rabbi Yehuda was saying earlier. So Rabbi Yehuda therefore has his roots in Shmuel, which again is not surprising. Says the Gemara, no raya from here at all that that's true. Because this case that Shmuel is talking about is not the same as our case where Rabbi Yehuda was coming in to share his opinion. Why not? Tir Gemara of Shalman, b'sheshnehem rotzen. It's different when both parties are willing to share the 2 volumes, the 2 scrolls. And therefore, that's not our case where they didn't want to share. Next, about a little bit more than a third of the way down, almost halfway down. Amar Meimar, Hilchasa halacha lamaisa, is dina de godo agod. We paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, and what we thought was Shmuel, but really not necessarily Shmuel, that we do allow for Mark and me to make these decisions together. Okay, we have to split, but it's not a fair split because there's really not enough to go around, so we can figure it out between Mark and me behind the scenes. Amar le Rav Ashi la Meimar, Hader Rav Nachman Mai. So he says to him, okay, I understand, Meimar, that you want to paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, but what do you do about the sheet of Rav Nachman? You can't just, you have to have a reason why you're pasking the way you're pasking. You don't just get to paskin the way you paskin stam. So the Gemara says, Meimar, you who paskin like Rav Yehuda, what do you do with Rav Nachman shita? Amar le, lo shmieli. I've never heard of such a shita. Klomar, lo svirali, that I really don't hold of it. Says the Gemara, really? Below? You've never seen a brisa or a mishnah that holds like Rav Nachman? Take a look at this. Who is this? Ravin. Ravin bar Chinana, V'Rav Dimi bar Chinana, 2 brothers. Shavach lehu avuha, tarte amhasa. He left over to his children Biyarusha 2 maidservants. Chada yoda afya uvishule. One was an excellent baker and an excellent cook. V'chada yoda pilcha v'navla. One of them knew how to spin threads and also how to weave fabric. Also the Kame de Rava, they went in front of Rava, they're like, what are we supposed to do? Amar Lahu, Leis Dina de Godo Agod, black on white. We see Rav Nachman's Shita is alive and well. So Ameimar, how can you say that we just paskin like Rabbi Yehuda? Lav Dafka? Says the Gemara, Shiny Hasam. It's different over there in the case of the Shtei Amhasa. Why is it different with the 2 maidservants? When it came to the case of the father who left over the 2 maidservants, the boys weren't satisfied with splitting the Amhasa. They both wanted both. That wasn't our case. Our case was where Mark and I were splitting, but okay, he took 4x4 and I took 4x3, and we have to figure out that's fine. That's not this case. In this case with the Shtei Amhasa, both sons wanted both maidservants, and therefore, in that case, we don't allow for godo agod. So says the Gemara, Ki ka'amar le shkol at chada v'anachada lav godo agod. That's what was the case over there. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second, after the parentheses, 2/3 of the way down. We just saw a din of Shmuel a couple of lines ago, that when it comes to Kisvei Kodesh, maybe in that case, they taka wanted both, just like the boys wanted both of the Amhasa, both of the maidservants in the case where the father left them that as a Yerusha. But Shmuel said, Lo shanu elak bekrach echad, that's only true with 1 krach where we're not allowed to be cholek. But with Shnei Krichin, we are cholken. So over there, it seems to be that's not like our case of Amhasa. Says the Gemara, we already said you can't ask from that case. We said, Hatir Gemara of Shalman bishe ratzu, or really bishe shnehen ratzu. And for the last sugya of the night, which really will carry into tomorrow night, Tanu Rabbanan, Madbik Adam, Torah, Nevi'im, Uksuvim, Ke'echad, Divrei Reb Meir. That would be a big hagba. If all 24 books of the canon were rolled in 1 scroll, that would be very, very impressive. And he says that Ladina, it's mutter. Now, some of the Tanaim don't like that. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Torah bifnei atzma, Nevi'im bifnei atzman, Uchsuvim bifnei atzman. All of the Torah have to be one book. Chamisha Chamisha Torah, like we have it. All of the Nevi'im have to be like 1 book. And Uchsuvim bifnei atzman, and ksuvim have to be separate as well. This sheet in the Tanaim is concerned that you might think that the Nevi'im have the same halachic status as the Torah, which is pashut, not true. So therefore they have to be separated. The Chachamim Mormon, they took it down even to a more granular level. No. Kol echad be'echad bifnei atzmo. Every single book in Navi has to be written separately. Shmuel's written by itself. Melachim is written by itself. V'chulei. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Maise bebaitus ben zonen, shahayu lo shmona nevi'in medubakin ke'echad al pi Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. He saw that there were all 8 books of Navi that were stuck together, sewn together in one beautiful scroll. And Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah was the posek acharon on that. So the Gemara says, V'yeshomim lo hayu lo ela echad bifnei atzmo. We're not exactly sure which one it was. Was it all 8 of the Sifrei Nevi'im biyachad, or were they written as individual svarim? We don't know. Omar Rebbe, Ma'aseh ve'viu lefanenu Torah Nevi'im uksuvim medubakim ke'echad ve'echsharnu. Rebbe says that there was a shita like Rav Meir, that all Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, all 24 books of the canon were put into one scroll, and Rebbe said it was kosher. Now listen to this. This is halacha l'maisa. Bein chumesh l'chumesh shel Torah arba shitin. If you're about Koreh, I'm sure David's familiar. When you get to the end of a sefer, the end of Bereshis and before Shmos, the end of Shmos and before Vayikra, and the same for the rest of the Svarim, there's 4 blank lines of parchment. There's sirtut, they're still lined, but there's nothing written there at all. 4 blank lines. V'chein bein chol navi l'navi. The same thing is true between Shmuel and between all of the other Nevi'im. Uven navi shel shnei masar, but within the single book of Shnei Masar, Gimel Shitin, between Yoel, Tzvan, Yoel, Chabakuk, all the small ones, there was only 3 lines. Umisai milamata umaskil milamala. And when it comes to the Nevi'im, if you finish on the last line of one column, you're allowed to start fresh on the top line, even though there are no 3 blank lines. That is considered to be acceptable. We'll stop right here at the Tanu Rabbanan, 2 lines before the bottom of the page. We'll pick up tomorrow night. Amir Hashem, wishing you all a beautiful night.